The second intermediate period did not arrive overnight. It was a result of Egypt's long process of internal weakening. After the end of the 12th dynasty, the pharaohs of the 13th dynasty moved the capital south to Thebes, leaving the Delta region, Egypt's most prosperous center of agriculture and trade. Poorly defended, that vacuum of power attracted waves of Canaanite migrants from the Levant. As early as the reign of Amenemhat I in the 12th dynasty, a small trade post named Hutware had been established in the far eastern delta. But as central authority waned, this post became a haven for thousands of foreigners. From it grew the city of Avaris, a bustling urban center with tombs containing donkey burials and Canaanite pottery with triangular motifs, clear markers of Levantine culture. The Egyptians refer to them as the Amu, or Asiatics. The term Hyksos is derived from the phrase Hyksos, meaning rulers of foreign lands. Initially, they arrived as traders and semi-nomadic herders, but they brought technologies previously unknown to Egypt. Horses, two-wheeled chariots, composite bows, and bronze armor and weaponry. As Egypt descended further into chaos with a series of short-lived pharaohs, these foreigners in Avaris gradually rose to military power. Around 1650 BC, their leader Solidas captured Memphis and founded the 15th dynasty of the Hyksos, establishing his capital at Avaris. What was remarkable was that they did not reject Egyptian culture. The Hyksos wore the royal crown, used hieroglyphic script, and built temples, yet they also maintained their own identity. They worshipped the god Seth, whom they equated with a storm deity from their homeland, and elevated him to equal status with Ra. This fusion of cultures allowed them both to legitimize their rule and preserve their foreign heritage. After Solidas laid the foundation for Hyksos rule in Avaris, their dynasty reached its zenith under kings Kion and Apophis. Around 1620 BCE, Kion ruled. His influence extended far beyond Egypt's borders. Seal impressions bearing his name have been found as far afield as Mesopotamia, beyond the Levant. This shows that under the Hyksos, Egypt became deeply enmeshed in a Near Eastern trade network, unprecedented in scope. From Avaris, caravans and fleets moved goods across the region. Nubian ivory, Lebanese cedar, Anatolian tin, aromatic oils, and precious stones all flowed through their hands. Egypt, once largely inward-looking and confined along the Nile, had now become a key link in an international trade system. Alongside this economic boom came a decisive military advantage. The Hyksos introduced horses and chariots, mobile and agile weapons Egypt had never seen. They wielded composite bows, crafted from layers of wood, sinew, and horn, with far greater power and range than traditional Egyptian bows. Thanks to this, a smaller Hyksos army could easily defeat larger native forces. These military innovations would leave a lasting impact. After the Hyksos were eventually expelled, the Egyptians would adopt and transform these tools into instruments of empire. But their influence extended beyond war and trade, touching daily life and culture. The Hyksos brought Levantine customs, black and white Canaanite pottery, donkey burials beside warriors' tombs, and foreign-influenced domestic architecture. All of this blended with native traditions, turning the Delta into a cultural crossroads between Egypt and the Near East. The true peak came during the reign of Apophis, Apipi, 1580 to 1550 BCE. He transformed Avaris from a fortified trading post into a great port city, complete with granaries, docks, and temples. Apophis was also a skilled diplomat. He forged alliances with Nubia to the south, forming a pincer movement that hemmed in Thebes, the last bastion of native Egyptian authority. What made Apophis stand out most was his religious strategy. He chose Seth, god of storms, chaos, and power, as the patron deity of his reign. To Apophis, Seth was the embodiment of Hyksos strength, and he boldly elevated Seth to the same status as Ra, Egypt's traditional solar deity. This daring synthesis served a dual purpose. It asserted foreign identity while cleverly using Egyptian theology to justify Hyksos' kingship. In the eyes of the Hyksos, Seth was divine proof that they had the right to rule the land of Egypt. While Apophis transformed Avaris into a powerful capital in the north, Thebes in the south remained the last stronghold of native Egyptian resistance. From the 17th century BCE, The line of 17 dynasty kings in Thebes maintained an independent rule, small in scale but deeply rooted in Egyptian tradition. In reality, at the start of Apophis' reign, Thebes was significantly weaker. For decades, it accepted the payment of tribute to the Hyksos in order to survive, yet the flame of resistance never truly extinguished. Around 1575 BCE, Theban king Senectenra began to reject submission altogether. He openly defied Apophis' authority, asserting that Thebes, not Avaris, was a legitimate center of Egypt. From that point, the 17th dynasty in Thebes became a symbol of unity, militarily fragile but growing stronger in resolve. When Akhenaten II ascended the throne, 1560 to 1558 BC, conflict erupted into open war. One famous tale recounts how Apophis sent a provocative message, complaining that the hippos in Thebes' sacred lake were keeping him awake all the way in Avaris, a thinly veiled insult designed to humiliate and force southern submission. Akhenaten refused to be dishonored. He took up arms and led his troops into direct confrontation. The battle was so fierce that his mummy still bears brutal wounds to this day, gashes to the skull from axes, spears, and maces, proof that he died on the battlefield, a martyr king who gave his life resisting Hyksos rule. His son Thutmose, 1558 to 1555 BCE, succeeded him and vowed to carry the struggle forward. Thutmose was not just a general. He turned war into a political doctrine. On steely carved at Karnak, he wrote fiery proclamations denouncing the shame of letting foreigners rule the north. Thutmose led daring campaigns deep into Lower Egypt, striking directly at Hyksos strongholds near Avaris. He also worked to cut off the Hyksos-Nubian alliance, a pincer movement that had long pressured Thebes from both north and south. Though Thutmose died young, his bold offensives paved the way for his successor's final victory. That successor was Thutmose I, 1550 to 1525 BCE, brother of Thutmose and son of Akhenaten II. Ascending the throne at a young age, Thutmose inherited the mission of national liberation. Around 1550 BCE, he launched a decisive campaign, the Siege of Avaris, the Hyksos capital. The battle was long and grueling, but ultimately Apophis was defeated and Avaris fell. The Hyksos fled to Sharuan in southern Palestine, but Thutmose pursued them relentlessly. He besieged the fortress for 3 years, eventually destroying it and ending Hyksos' power in Egypt once and for all. With that victory, Thutmose I reunified the country after nearly 2 centuries of division, founding the 18th dynasty and ushering in the New Kingdom, the most glorious era in ancient Egyptian history. After defeating the Hyksos, Thutmose I did not stop there. He expanded Egypt's influence southward into Nubia to control the gold mines, and northward into Palestine to prevent future invasions. As a result, Egypt ceased to be merely a riverine kingdom along the Nile and began to take shape as a regional empire. Internally, Thutmose began to rebuild the nation, restoring temples destroyed during the war, reorganizing the administrative system, and restarting an economy that had long been stagnant. After Thutmose, the throne passed to his son, Amenhotep I, 1525 to 1504 BCE. If Thutmose is remembered as a warrior king, Amenhotep is seen as an organizer and builder. He no longer faced powerful external invaders, and thus focused on securing Egypt's borders, particularly along Nubia and the Near East. During his reign, the army was maintained in strength but saw fewer campaigns. Instead, Egypt began to develop a stable governance model for peacetime. Amenhotep I's most groundbreaking achievement was in the realm of royal burial practices. Rather than continuing the pyramid tradition, which had become prone to tomb robbery, he established a new royal necropolis, the Valley of the Kings in western Thebes. From this point forward, pharaohs would no longer be buried in towering pyramids, but in hidden rock-cut tombs within the mountains. This was a strategic shift, one that ensured security, while also creating a new political religious center closely tied to the cult of Ammonius in Thebes. Upon Amenhotep I's death without a direct heir, the throne passed to a skilled general, likely connected to the royal family by marriage, Thutmose 1504 to 1492 BCE. From the outset of his reign, Thutmose I made Egypt's military power clear. In the south, he launched a major campaign into Nubia, personally slaying the Nubian king, and display his body on the prow of the lead ship as a warning to others. Thutmose not only defeated the Nubians, but pushed deep into their territory, constructing fortified outposts along the Nile to ensure lasting control. The annexation of Nubia brought with it vast quantities of gold, greatly enriching the royal treasury. He did not stop there. Thutmose pushed northward, and now equipped with horses and chariots. Technologies learned from the Hyksos. Egyptian forces crossed Sinai, reaching as far as the Euphrates River in Syria. There, he erected a commemorative stela, marking the first time Egyptian influence had extended so far beyond the Nile Valley. This was a pivotal moment, laying the foundation for Egypt to become a transcontinental empire, stretching from Nubia to the Near East. What made Thutmose I remarkable was that he was not only a warrior. He understood that an empire could not be built on the sword alone. It needed a spiritual center. Thus, he became one of the first pharaohs to expand the temple complex at Karnak, erecting pylons and temples to Ammonius, the god who was fast becoming the national deity. This fusion of military glory and divine authority reinforced the image of the pharaoh not just as ruler of Egypt, but as lord of the four corners of the earth. Notably, under Thutmose I, the tradition of royal burials in the Valley of the Kings was firmly established. His tomb is considered one of the first monumental constructions in the valley, inaugurating a practice that would last for centuries. Thutmose II, 1492 to 1479 BCE, succeeded him, but very little is known about his reign. He was quickly overshadowed by his powerful half-sister, Hatshepsut, who ruled circa 1479 to 1458 BCE, became one of the most effective and powerful rulers of the new kingdom. Thutmose II had one child with her, and another son with a secondary wife, Thutmose III, whom he designated as a successor. Thutmose III would later reign from 1479 to 1425 BCE. When Thutmose II died, Thutmose III was still too young to rule independently. As a result, his principal wife, Queen Hatshepsut, stepped into the political spotlight as regent. Initially, she acted in the name of protecting the young king's throne, but gradually, she donned a royal crown herself, proclaimed herself pharaoh, and even wore male attire to solidify her image. Her nearly 20-year reign was marked by peace and prosperity. Hatshepsut prioritized trade and construction over military conquest. Her most significant achievement was a trade expedition to Punt, a legendary land near the Red Sea, possibly modern-day Somalia or Eritrea. Her fleet returned with gold, ivory, myrrh, incense, exotic animals, and most notably, live myrrh trees planted in temple courtyards, living proof of Egypt's wealth and far-sighted diplomacy. In architecture, Hatshepsut left behind an immortal masterpiece, her mortuary temple at Deir el-Bahari, carved into the cliffs of Thebes. 3 grand terraces of colonnades rose in succession, with staircases leading upward, flanked by Sphinx statues and reliefs depicting her welcoming tribute from Punt. This was not merely a temple. It was a political statement, affirming her power and status equal to any male pharaoh. Hatshepsut was also a shrewd administrator. She maintained peace domestically and abroad, skillfully allied herself with the powerful priesthood of Ammonius at Karnak, thereby reinforcing her religious legitimacy. She commissioned multiple constructions at Karnak, including colossal red granite obelisks from Aswan, one of which still stands tall today. Uniquely, Hatshepsut's image and statuary often conveyed a rare humanism in Egyptian royal art. Her statues frequently portrayed her with a calm, serene expression rather than the rigid sternness of warrior pharaohs. This made her a singular model of rulership, a female pharaoh who governed not by sword, but by wisdom, commerce, and cultural patronage. When Hatshepsut died, the throne returned to Thutmose III, 1479 to 1425 BCE, a king whom later generations would call the Napoleon of Egypt. For nearly 2 decades, he had lived in the shadow of the powerful female pharaoh, but once he assumed full control, he transformed Egypt from a prosperous kingdom into a true empire, stretching from Nubia in the south to Euphrates River in the north. His first great triumph came at the Battle of Megiddo in 1457 BC. Over 300 Canaanite city-states, united under the king of Kadesh, sought to block Egypt's advance. But Thutmose III chose the dangerous Aruna Pass, a narrow route no one dared to take. The element of surprise threw the Canaanites into disarray. They fled into the city of Megiddo, which was then besieged for 7 months before surrendering. This victory not only opened Canaan to Egyptian domination, but was also the first battle in history to be recorded in detail, with inscriptions still visible today on the walls of Karnak Temple. After Megiddo, Thutmose III pressed further. He advanced deep into Syria-Palestine, crushing vassal coalitions, and even crossed the desert to reach the Euphrates River, where he erected a stela in Mitanni territory. Simultaneously in the south, he conquered Nubia, establishing fortified garrisons to guard the region's gold mines, key to enriching Egypt's treasury. From this point on, Egypt possessed a vast vassal network, bringing tribute and hostages to the pharaoh. This expansion brought Egypt immense wealth: gold from Nubia, ivory and animal hides from Africa, copper and turquoise from Sinai, cedarwood from Byblos, as well as horses, chariots, and luxury goods from Syria. Trade with Punt and the island of Crete also flourished, turning Egypt into a hub of transcontinental commerce. While his campaigns continued, Thutmose III also sought to divinely immortalize his victories. At Karnak, he expanded the temple complex of Ammonius Ra and constructed the Akhmenu Festival Hall, a building that served both religious and historical purposes. Its reliefs glorify the pharaoh but also meticulously record military campaigns, spoils of war, and tribute processions, making a unique stone chronicle of ancient Egypt. Thutmose III's legacy was the transformation of Egypt into preeminent power of the ancient Near East. No pharaoh before him had extended Egypt's reach so far or sustained it so effectively. To later generations, Thutmose III was both warrior and strategist, and the one who defined Egypt's imperial model. From Hatshepsut's shadow, he rose to greatness, one of the most legendary pharaohs in history. Upon his death, his son Amenhotep II, 1425 to 1401 BCE, ascended the throne. If his father had been a master of expansion, Amenhotep II focused on consolidating what had been gained. He faced early rebellions among vassals in Syria-Canaan. Military campaigns were launched, and stele at Karnak depict him personally executing dozens of rebel leaders, both to intimidate vassals and to assert his dominance. During his reign, Egypt retained control of the Near East, but only through constant military pressure to maintain its vast empire. His successor, Thutmose IV, 1401 to 1391 BCE, was not known for major wars, but rather for how he legitimized his claim to the throne. According to legend, as a young prince, Thutmose went hunting near Giza and slept beneath the Great Sphinx. In a dream, the Sphinx promised him the Egyptian throne if he would clear away the sand burying its body. After becoming pharaoh, Thutmose IV erected the dream stele between the Sphinx's paws, inscribing this tale, a divine endorsement of his kingship. This served not only as a political instrument, perhaps because the succession was not straightforward, but also marked a religious milestone. The Sphinx became a sacred protector of royal authority. After the relatively brief reign of Thutmose IV, the throne passed to his son, Amenhotep III, 1390 to 1352 BC. The reign of Amenhotep III marked the peak of prosperity and peace during the New Kingdom. Unlike his militaristic predecessors, Amenhotep III relied heavily on diplomacy and political marriages. He wed princesses from the kingdoms of Mitanni, Babylon, and even the Hittites, turning the Egyptian royal family into the centerpiece of an international alliance system. The Amarna letters document a vast diplomatic network, featuring lavish exchanges of gold, precious stones, horses, chariots, and foreign princesses. Domestically, he focused on architecture and the arts. Amenhotep III commissioned the magnificent Luxor Temple along the Nile, expanded the temple complex at Karnak, and left behind the colossi of Memnon. two colossal 18-meter statues that once guard the entrance to his grand mortuary temple. Art during his reign reached unprecedented levels of refinement and splendor, reflecting Egypt's wealth and stability. Religion continued to revolve around the god Ammonius at Karnak, which became the largest pilgrimage and worship center in Egypt. Following Amenhotep III's glorious reign, the throne passed to his son, Amenhotep IV, 1352 to 1336 BCE, better known in history as Akhenaten. Few pharaohs have been as controversial as he, for Akhenaten undertook an unprecedented religious revolution in Egyptian history. From the beginning of his reign, Amenhotep IV showed clear favor toward Aten, the solar disk god whose rays were depicted with outstretched hands. Instead of maintaining Ammonius' traditional central role, he gradually elevated Aten to supreme status. At the height of this reform, he changed his name to Akhenaten, meaning servant of Aten, and declared exclusive worship of Aten, while actively suppressing other deities, particularly Ammonius and the powerful priesthood of Karnak. This was among the earliest attempts at monotheism in recorded history. To distance himself from the influence of the Ammonius cult in Thebes, Akhenaten relocated the capital to a completely new site along the Nile, naming it Akhenaten, Horizon of Aten, now known as Amarna. The city was constructed rapidly, featuring enormous temples to Aten, royal palaces, administrative buildings, and residential areas, all aligned along the sun's path, symbolizing devotion to the one true God. Alongside his religious revolution, Amarna art flourished. In stark contrast to earlier rigid, idealized forms, Akhenaten's era ushered in a style that was more naturalistic and intimate. Reliefs and sculptures depicted the pharaoh with Queen Nefertiti and their daughters in everyday scenes, eating, playing, embracing. Imagery unprecedented in Egyptian tradition. Even Akhenaten's statues displayed unusual features: elongated face, protruding belly, wide hips, challenging the traditional divine aesthetics. Scholars still debate whether these forms were symbolic religious representations, or whether the king suffered from a genetic disorder. However, Akhenaten's reforms did not bring stability. By neglecting military and diplomatic affairs and focusing almost exclusively on religion, he allowed Egypt's influence in Canaan and Syria to erode. The Amarna letters record desperate pleas from vassal kings for help against the Hittites and other invaders, but the court of Akhenaten barely responded. After Akhenaten's death, Egypt entered a period of disarray. The city of Akhenaten was abandoned, the court fragmented, and Egypt's vassal territories in Levant gradually broke free from its control. Amidst this turmoil, a young boy, perhaps only 8 or 9 years old, ascended the throne, Tutankhaten, meaning living image of Aten. But shortly after, under the guidance of royal officials and priests, he changed his name to Tutankhamen, living image of Ammonius. This renaming was not just personal. It marked a clear reversal of Akhenaten's religious policies and a restoration of the Ammonius cult. During his brief reign, 1332 to 1323 BCE, Tutankhamen remained largely a puppet king, still too young to rule. Real power lay with influential viziers, such as Ai and generals like Horemheb. Nonetheless, under the young king's name, the court undertook significant reforms. The capital was moved back from Akhenaten to Memphis and Thebes. The temples of Ammonius were rebuilt, the priesthood of Ammonius regained authority, and traditional Egyptian religion was reinstated. This religious restoration helped stabilize the national psyche, which had been shaken by nearly 2 decades of upheaval. Interestingly, while Tutankhamen did not achieve military or architectural greatness, he did sponsor a few modest building projects, mostly aimed at completing or restoring abandoned temples. He is also depicted in some inscriptions as leading minor military campaigns in Nubia and against rebellious Canaanite vassals, though these were likely symbolic gestures with little historical substance. Tutankhamen died very young, at around 18 or 19 years old. The cause of his death remains one of Egyptology's greatest mysteries. Some theories suggest he suffered from congenital illnesses, possibly due to inbreeding. His parents are believed to be Akhenaten and one of his full sisters. Others suspect a chariot accident, or even a political assassination. But what turned Tutankhamen into a global legend was not his reign, but the discovery of his nearly intact tomb in the Valley of the Kings, unearthed by Howard Carter in 1922. In that small yet treasure-filled chamber, the world uncovered the famous golden mask, along with thousands of priceless artifacts, statues, jewelry, weapons, chariots, and the mummified body of the young king himself. This discovery shocked the world, becoming one of the greatest archaeological finds of the 20th century, sparking a widespread Egyptomania across the Western world. Following Tutankhamun's death, the Egyptian throne entered a brief period of political instability. Power initially fell into the hands of Ai, an elderly courtier who had served as a close advisor to both Akhenaten and Tutankhamun. But Ai's reign was short-lived, and upon his death, the throne passed to a completely different figure, Horemheb, the commander-in-chief of the Egyptian army. Horemheb was not of royal blood, nor a member of the immediate royal family. However, he held military control and enjoyed the support of loyal officials. When he ascended the throne around 1323 BC, Horemheb declared himself chosen by the gods to restore order after the chaos of the Amarna period. Horemheb's reign was marked by sweeping political and legal reforms. From the outset, he launched a campaign to purge the officials who had profited under Akhenaten's regime, those who had disrupted traditional order by promoting Aten and undermining Egypt's ancestral deities. Several surviving stele record Horemheb's reform decrees. He introduced strict regulations against corruption, punished abusive officials, and ensured fair treatment of the population in matters like taxation and labor conscription. This was one of the rare moments in Egyptian history when a pharaoh focused more on rule of law than purely on divine authority. In terms of religion, Horemheb continued the restoration efforts begun by Tutankhamun and Ai. He reinstated the worship of Ammonius and the priesthood of Thebes. Temples abandoned during the Amarna era were rebuilt, traditional rituals were revived, and the clergy of Ammonius regained power. In doing so, Horemheb gradually erased the legacy of Aten and the Amarna period, reasserting the concept of Ma'at, the cosmic order and divine justice that had been shaken for nearly 2 decades. Significantly, Horemheb had no sons to succeed him. He chose another general, Paramesu, as a successor. This man would ascend the throne as Ramses I, founding Dynasty 19. Horemheb's decision reflects his understanding of the need for strong succession to prevent the return of instability. Ramses I, 1292 to 1290 BC, inaugurated the 19th dynasty. Although his reign lasted only about 2 years, he played a pivotal role in passing the throne to his son Seti I under conditions of stability. Before his death, Ramses I reinforced the court after the chaos of the Amarna period, reorganized the military and bureaucracy, and laid the groundwork for a national revival. 444. Seti I, 1290 to 1279 BCE, continued his father's work, becoming one of Egypt's most formidable military pharaohs. He launched major campaigns, defeating vassal states in Canaan, penetrating deep into Syria, and directly confronting the Hittites, reaffirming Egypt's status as a great power. But Seti I was not only a warrior, he was also a magnificent builder. His temple at Abydos stands as a masterpiece, adorned with exquisite reliefs and housing the famous Abydos King list, a canonical list of pharaohs that affirmed the continuity of Egypt's royal lineage. His son, Ramses II, 1279 to 1213 BCE, often known as Ramses the Great, is widely considered the most celebrated and iconic pharaoh of ancient Egypt, both militarily and culturally. He reigned for over 60 years, an exceptionally long rule, and transformed Egypt into a regional superpower, inscribing his name in stone across the length of the Nile through monumental constructions. Ramses II ascended the throne amid the grandeur of a strong dynasty, but also under the pressure of facing a powerful rival in the Hittite Empire. For generations, both Egypt and the Hittites had vied for Syria, a region filled with wealthy city-states that lay on the critical trade routes between the Mediterranean and Mesopotamia. At the heart of this conflict stood the city of Kadesh. In the 5th year of his reign, around 1274 BC, Ramses II personally led a massive army of approximately 20,000 troops, divided into 4 divisions named after the gods Ammonius, Ra, Ta, and Seth, marching northward through Canaan. The Egyptian forces were equipped with elite 2-man chariot divisions, seasoned infantry, and an unwavering confidence in their pharaoh's might. But Ramses had no idea that his adversary, Hittite King Muwatalli II, had devised a brilliant ambush. As Ramses and the Ammonius division approached Kadesh, he received reports from captured Hittite prisoners, who were in fact spies, claiming that the Hittite army was still far away. Trusting their words, Ramses advanced rapidly, separating from the other divisions. Upon setting up camp near Kadesh, he discovered too late that the full Hittite army, some 40,000 men and over 3,000 three-man chariots, had already been lying in wait. The Hittites launched a surprise attack, their heavy chariots crashing into the Egyptian camp, throwing Ramses' forces into chaos. In this dire moment, Ramses II revealed the bearing of a true warrior king. Mounted on his chariot, he and his personal guard charged into the heart of the enemy, rallying his troops and leading the counterattack. In later inscriptions at Abu Simbel and the Ramesseum, Ramses is depicted as a godlike figure, single-handedly vanquishing thousands of foes. Though likely embellished for propaganda, his bravery clearly stabilized the battlefield. At that critical hour, the Ta division arrived in time to reinforce and break the Hittite assault. The battle turned into a fierce stalemate, lasting for hours, with neither side claiming decisive victory. In the end, Ramses II was forced to retreat, while the Hittites retained control of Kadesh. Yet in the grand scheme of things, neither side had the strength to decisively defeat the other. A few years later, both Egypt and the Hittite Empire realized that continued warfare only drained their resources, especially as common threats, nomadic tribes, and the rising Assyrian power began to emerge. Thus, in 1259 BCE, Ramses II and Hatshepsut III, the younger brother and successor of Muwatalli II, signed a peace treaty inscribed in both cuneiform and hieroglyphs, now recognized as the oldest known surviving bilateral peace treaty in human history. Ramses II was not only known for war, but also revered as the great builder king. He left behind a vast legacy of monumental works. The temple at Abu Simbel, with colossal statues over 20 meters tall carved directly into mountainside, aligned with the sun, the massive Ramesseum mortuary temple, and major expansions at Karnak and Luxor. His name was also inscribed onto many earlier monuments, making it difficult for later generations to distinguish between his own achievements and those he inherited. During his reign, Egypt reached the pinnacle of its power, wealth, and stability. Arts and culture flourished, from colossal statues and battle reliefs to hymns praising the pharaoh. To the people, Ramses II embodied the image of a divine, eternal ruler upholding Ma'at, the cosmic order. Later Egyptians, from the New Kingdom to the Greco-Roman era, revered him as the greatest pharaoh, the ultimate symbol of Egypt's golden age. After his remarkably long reign, the throne passed to Merneptah, 1213-1203 BCE, his 13th son, as many of the elder princes had died. Though elderly when he ascended the throne, Merneptah proved to be a vigorous ruler, facing serious challenges both from within and without. At the start of his reign, he had to fend off invasions by the Sea Peoples and Libyan forces on Egypt's western frontier. In a major military campaign, Merneptah defeated a coalition of over 40,000 Libyans and allied tribes from the Aegean and Anatolia. This victory was recorded on the Merneptah stele, erected at his temple in Thebes. The stele also contains a historically significant reference. It marks the first known mention of Israel in Egyptian records, describing it as a small people group in Canaan, the earliest non-biblical reference to the Israelites, making it one of the most important archaeological artifacts ever discovered. After Merneptah's death, Egypt entered a period of instability. The throne passed to his son, Seti II, 1203 to 1197 BCE, but his authority was soon challenged. A rival, possibly a non-royal lineage, named Amenmès, seized power in southern Egypt, creating a period of dual kingship that lasted several years. When Seti II eventually regained full control, the court had already been deeply damaged by intrigue and internal strife. Following Seti II, the throne passed to Siptah, 1197 to 1191 BC, a young king who may have been an illegitimate son of either Seti II or Amenmès. Due to his youth and frail health, real power was held by the Chancellor Bey, a powerful official of foreign origin, possibly Syrian or Canaanite. Under Siptah, the country remained unstable, with many local regions operating semi-independently, and the royal court steadily losing its authority. Ultimately, the throne passed to Tuzret 1191 to 1189 BCE, the widow of Seti II. She became one of the few female pharaohs in Egyptian history, declaring herself ruler and reigning for several years. Tuzret commissioned a lavish tomb in the Valley of the Kings, KV-14, originally intended for herself and her late husband. However, her reign ended in turmoil. A civil war broke out, with nobles and officials rising in rebellion. Her downfall marked the end of Dynasty 19 and paved the way for a new military figure, Setnakht, founder of Dynasty XX. After the death of the female pharaoh Tuzret and the collapse of Dynasty 19, Egypt plunged into chaos. The throne was contested, civil war broke out, and both local nobles and foreign-born officials rose up in a struggle for power. In this turbulent context, a general named Setnakht, 1189 to 1186 BC, emerged as a restorer of order. He founded Dynasty XX, crushed rival factions, reclaimed Memphis, and reasserted the authority of the pharaoh. Though his reign lasted only 3 years, Setnakht succeeded in stabilizing the country, laying the foundation for his son, Ramses III, to continue. Ramses III, 1186 to 1155 BC, is considered the last truly powerful pharaoh of ancient Egypt. He ascended the throne during a time when the Mediterranean world was being shaken by mass migrations and invasions by the Sea Peoples, and Ramses III bore the heavy responsibility of defending Egypt. He led 2 major campaigns against this formidable alliance. On land, Ramses III positioned his forces along Egypt's eastern frontier, halting the Sea Peoples near the Gaza region. The reliefs at the Medinet Habu temple depict dramatic scenes of battle, with Egyptian archers, infantry, and chariots crushing the invaders. At sea, he organized a naval fleet to intercept the enemy at the mouth of the Nile. As the enemy's ships entered, Egyptian forces used nets, grappling hooks, and arrows fired from the banks, in coordination with warships, to destroy the invading force. This is considered one of the earliest recorded naval battles in history. Victory over the Sea Peoples spared Egypt from the fate of many other Mediterranean civilizations of the time, the Hittites, Mycenaeans, and others that were completely destroyed. However, this was also Egypt's last imperial victory. After the wars, Ramses III continued campaigns into Nubia and Libya and sponsored construction of grand monuments. Most notable is his mortuary temple at Medinet Habu in Thebes, a vast fortress-like complex with towering walls, colonnaded courtyards, and dramatic reliefs celebrating his military victories. This structure served as both his tomb and a vivid testament to the last flicker of classical Egyptian power. However, court intrigues would soon shake the royal palace. Late in Ramses III's reign, a major palace conspiracy, known as the Harem Conspiracy, was uncovered. One of his queens, Tai, plotted to assassinate him in order to place her son on the throne. Numerous officials, priests, and palace guards were implicated. Trial records found in the Turin Judicial Papyrus and other legal texts reveal that the plot was discovered and dozens of conspirators were executed. Yet Ramses III's mummy shows a deep wound on the throat, evidence that he was in fact successfully assassinated in 1155 BCE. Ramses IV, 1155 to 1149 BCE, succeeded his father after this tragic death. He sought to reaffirm his authority through ambitious construction projects in Thebes, and through expansion of mining expeditions for copper, gold, and precious stones in Sinai and Nubia. Surviving papyri detail the mobilization of thousands of workers, demonstrating that Egypt still retained some capacity for resource mobilization. However, the economy, already strained by the wars and court corruption during Ramses III's reign, could no longer support such endeavors. Corruption and embezzlement within the bureaucracy became increasingly evident. Ramses V, 1149 to 1145 BCE, ruled briefly, but is most noted for administrative documents known as the Wilbur Papyrus, which records detailed information about land ownership, taxation, and the influence of the Ammonius priesthood in Thebes. These documents clearly show how economic and political power had shifted toward the priesthood. Ramses VI, 1145 to 1137 BCE, continued the royal building tradition, expanding his royal tomb in the Valley of the Kings. In fact, His reuse and extension of an earlier tomb site helped shield the tomb of Tutankhamun, located just below it, from looters for centuries. However, during his reign, the financial crisis became starkly apparent. Workers building royal tombs went on strike due to food shortages, an event considered one of the earliest recorded labor strikes in history. Ramses VII, 1137 to 1130 BCE, and Ramses VIII, 1130 to 1129 BCE, left few marks on history, reflecting a time when the royal court had grown weak and could no longer support large-scale building projects or military campaigns. Ramses IX, 1129 to 1111 BCE, is best remembered for the widespread looting of royal tombs, including many in the Valley of the Kings. Records from the Abbot Papyrus detail the investigations of numerous officials, craftsmen, and soldiers implicated in grave robbery, evidence of the growing disorder and erosion of central authority. Ramses X, 1111 to 1107 BCE, had a short and unremarkable reign. But during his rule, Egypt's governmental decline became more pronounced. The army was no longer fully loyal to the pharaoh, large territories were left unprotected, and looting became widespread. Ramses XI, 1107 to 1069 BCE, was the last pharaoh of Dynasty XX, and the one who witnessed the final collapse of the New Kingdom. Under his rule, Egypt became fractured. In the south, the high priest Ammonius in Thebes effectively ruled independently, while in the north, the general Smen took control of the Nile Delta and would later found Dynasty XXI. Though Ramses XI still bore the title of pharaoh, his power was merely symbolic. Upon his death around 1069 BCE, Egypt's glorious New Kingdom came to a definitive end, and the country entered the Third Intermediate Period, a time of fragmentation and decentralization.